Hey everybody, welcome to the Tom's Hardware Show, where we're going to be talking to you every week about the coolest things going on in the tech enthusiasm world and what we're working on here at Tom's Hardware. So I'm Sharon Harding, Senior Editor at Tom's Hardware. We also have Matt Safford, Managing Editor, and dialing in is Andrew Friedman, one of our other Senior Editors. Hey Andrew.
Hello.
So starting off this show this week, I think it would be fun to talk about what we're all working on right now. So why don't we start with you, Andrew, since you're so kind enough to dial in for this week's
Oh,
show.
sure. So we just put up our review of this very, very pink laptop. This is the MSI Prestige 14. They just released it in pink. It had been available in gray for a few months. And so we reviewed it. It's got Comet Lake inside. It's got a GTX 1650. And it's a serviceable laptop. It will do a lot of people well. I'm going to show you a little bit more of the pink. It's really pink all over the place. And I really, I don't love this shade of pink, but I love that it is pink. I love that we're seeing color because we don't see a lot of color. We often hear vendors say they're worried people won't buy it, so we'll see where this goes. The laptop as a whole is pretty serviceable. The performance is decent. The 1650, I could take or leave unless you're doing some really not very intensive gaming. The display is a little dim. I wish it was as bright as this chassis is. But the battery life is above average. So if you're looking for something real thin and light to take with you everywhere and then make a statement in Starbucks, there is a bright pink MSI laptop waiting for you.
Now, does that laptop come in other colors too?
This one, right now, they're selling it in gray as well. Most configurations come in gray. This pink one only comes in this configuration with 512, 16 gigabytes of RAM, the Core i7 Comet Lake, and the 1650. But if you wanted more storage or a slightly lesser processor, you can get it in gray.
Nice. But who would want to do that when you could get it in pink, right?
Exactly.
Awesome.
They didn't sell thousands of black Razer blades just because the pink one exists.
Nice. So we could talk about what I'm working on now, which is I'm actually reviewing a portable monitor from MSI. It's the Optics Mag 161V. It's a 15.6-inch monitor. It's an IPS panel, and of course, the point of it is to basically expand your screen real estate, aid in productivity. So what I'm looking for, typical monitor things like brightness, how well videos and apps to commonly use apps look on it, its color coverage, things like that. But as a portable monitor, obviously you want it to be portable. So what's really important actually is the stand for when you're actually setting it up. And as you can see, this uses an origami style stand, and I'm gonna try to unfold it, but I'm probably gonna mess it up because every morning I have a hard time doing it. Yep, look, messed it up. So I'm struggling, but the point is that this is not the easiest stand for me. Matt, I know you have a portable monitor of your own, so you have some opinions on proper stands.
I have an ASUS one that uses a very similar stand, and I mean, I don't think it shifts so much in the back the way this one seems like it does, but the folding in of the front, it's not so bad if you're using it every day. You're taking, you're putting it away, you're setting it up, you'll remember how to use it. But if you go, for a few weeks without using it and then try to remember how to reset it up, it always takes like another couple of minutes and makes you feel stupid as you're.
Oh yeah, so that's what I'm working on these days. So you, Matt, are working on something that looks so cool and so amazing.
Yeah, so this is the Strammer Plus from Lian Li. It's the actually second generation of basically RGB extension cables for a power supply. So it comes in 24-pin version and 8-pin PCIe version for plugging into your graphics cards. It is, I think, much more attractive than the original one that we looked at last year, which basically had just translucent, clear cable wires. And so these are kind of like embedded in a rubber track. They're much brighter. They look better when they're off. And most importantly, you can turn it off with this box, but you have to cycle through all the settings until you get there, and eventually you may get to the off setting.
But again, why would you want it off? Pretty colors all day, no?
What about software? Does that
It does not. If your motherboard has a I'm just cycling through the colors, not the
Ooh.
effects. So, if your motherboard has a 5-pin addressable RGB header, I'm trying to find a setting that won't give anyone seizures. Okay, now we'll get to the off eventually. There.
Nice.
So, yeah. So, if you have a 5-pin addressable RGB header, you can plug it into that and control it basically with any of the major motherboard manufacturers' RGB lighting software. But it also comes with this box, which I can't really move around too much because there are 3 cables going in and out of it. It is an improvement over last year's in that it is a box instead of an expansion bracket, which existed last year, and there was no way to turn the lights off in the previous one. So I think that's a major improvement, because even if you're willing to spend, if you want to spend lots of money to add lights to your case, there's definitely going to be times when you're watching a movie, you want to take a nap maybe, when you don't want the lights screaming in your face. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a big step up from the previous one. There's still, I think the build quality is much better, because in the first one, when I was testing it, some of the tubes actually came out of this bracket.
Oh,
When I
no.
was bending it, and I had to like kind of take it apart and stick them back in. That didn't happen here. And the last one also had like exposed screws on these plastic brackets. Those are gone. But there's still some issues with when you bend these cables. These black brackets at the end tend to separate, and they can be really difficult to put back on when the cables are in your case. So, but it's definitely one of the most, I think, unique RGB lighting products, and that you can shove in your case if you're not sick of RGB, and so many people are.
Yeah, so I think this drimer was getting a lot of attention from people in the office today as we were setting it up. And so I guess one of the questions we kept getting was, why would someone buy this? Is it just for the pretty lights? Is there anything else useful about it?
I mean, it's basically just for the pretty lights, and it's expensive. This is actually a little bit more expensive than the previous model. So the 24-pin version is going to sell for $60, and the PCIe version for $40. But Lian Li says in the first month that this is available, which will be, I think, the 26th of February until close to the end of March. If you buy the 24-pin version during that time, you will get $10 off, so it'll be $50. But it's still, if you get both, even with that discount, it's $90. But I mean, they are essentially sleeved expansion cables, which are also pretty popular in for PC builders, and often these kits alone, without the lights, cost $20, $30 each on their own. So if you're considering that and you like RGB, it's not a huge extra expense, but yes, it's all about aesthetics for sure.
Well, I like that. Andrew, you did your own build kind of recently, right?
My brother and I built his, actually the first one he's ever had, but it has far less RGB than this. It's it's just the RAM in his is RGB. And the first thing he wanted to do when we turned it on was turn that off.
Oh.
Which it's a total preference thing. I think the problem he was having is the software it was not remembering his preferences when he booted it up, and I think eventually he just gave up, and he goes, well, it's not that much lighting. But so that was a pretty simple Ryzen 2600 build for him, and he actually wanted to play primarily some older games. So I don't think this is not in the market for him. I kind of like the look of this, but my case is real small, and I have a feeling there's not enough room in the back of it to fit the original 24-pin cable.
Yeah, you make a good point. That's one of the other big drawbacks of this, is that since these are essentially expansion cables, extension cables for the cables that already exist on your power supply, basically all of the cabling for the 24-pin cable and your PCIe, if you go that route with this one as well, will have to be shoved somewhere behind the case or behind the motherboard tray, or maybe inside a PSU shroud, whatever. I mean, you could, of course, just like stick them down here somewhere, but it's going to look ugly. And of course, the whole point of this is to make your system look nicer. So, I mean, it's not going to work in every case. It's not ideal for particularly small cases. I installed it in my system at home, which is a Corsair 280X, which is kind of a compact case, but it's very wide. So there's a lot of space behind the motherboard, and that's ideal for that. But there's definitely going to be a lot of cases where it won't fit. So.
You guys are working with all the colorful stuff. I just got this dark black thing.
You could play my GIF of that on the monitor.
I'll have to visit tomshardware.com to do that, which I will. Awesome. Yeah, so that's a little bit of what some of the editors here at Tom's Hardware are working on this week. We've also, of course, been keeping up with all the latest news, and hopefully you guys are too on our site. But some of the big things that came out this week was actually NVIDIA's game streaming service, GeForce Now. It had been in beta for 3 years, but now it's actually out. You can sign up and you can actually play games without having a gaming PC with like the latest graphics cards. You can play the game streaming from the cloud on, even a tablet, a smartphone, things like that. So actually, Andrew, I know you reviewed Google Stadia for us, which is Google's cloud game streaming service. Do you have any thoughts on how GeForce Now is looking in the market?
I think the initial model and the differences between it are pretty fascinating. So NVIDIA, as they're doing it, they're letting you bring your own games, right? So anything you have in theory, anything you have in Steam or in the Epic Games Store or other launchers will be available to you in the cloud. While in Google, you have to go into Google's marketplace and buy them separately. Either way, you have to own the games.
But at least you can buy the games on Steam and in the Epic Store, right? That's kind of the problem with the Stadia is that, at least in launch, there were very few games. So
right now, not every game is supported. A whole bunch of developers, some of them who were working in the beta have, I guess there may be rights issues or something. They haven't really said, but for instance, the Tomb Raider games, which are very popular, especially Shadow, which is a popular RTX game, not there. There's like Capcom's games aren't there, Rockstar's games aren't there, Remedy's games aren't there. And a lot of those are developers that make the RTX games that are in the Founders Edition $5 a month tier. So they really got to get like all of these games available for this to be at its best.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's particularly a problem since NVIDIA has kind of had, some difficulties in expanding the interest and the titles available for ray tracing, right? And this is another way to kind of showcase that technology. But then, if a number of the games of the few games, sorry NVIDIA, that actually support it, are pulling out from their service, it's just, it's not a good look, right?
Yeah, I'm curious if they have some sort of deal with Google or other streaming service providers for like timed exclusivity. The other interesting thing is that NVIDIA is launching with 2 tiers, a free tier for what they call standard access. You get 1 hour of play and then they kick you out and they make you queue up again, which is not great. If you put time, that's not so bad. The other Founders tier is $5 a month. You get RTX, you get what they call priority access. You'll jump ahead in the queue. You get extended session length, which I'm not sure if they specified specifically how long extended is off the top of my head. And I think it's right now as we talk, it's free for 90 days to try. But it's launching with a free tier. Stadia has promised a free tier, but that's not here yet. So people still have to pay to try that. And there have been a lot of people come the turn of the year that said, well, Stadia feels like I paid for a beta. Where right now, NVIDIA just came out of what they call a beta, but you could try it for free before you buy into it.
Yeah, I think that's important too because there are a lot of factors involved, right? It's not going to be entirely clear for everyone if their internet is good enough to do this or to do this well. And obviously, some games are going to work better over streaming than others. I think there are a lot of people who know enough about PC gaming to know, I'm not going to be able to play Counter-Strike at super high frame rates. It's going to be a problem. But the people who maybe are interested in trying this, some of them probably don't know those issues. So it's going to be an interesting thing. And there's so many of these services have launched in the 11 or so years that I've been officially in this business, launched and failed. So, and
does anybody miss OnLive?
I mean, probably just the employees.
It's an interesting thing because Microsoft's Phil Spencer, the Xbox boss there, just said the other day that, well, our competition is no longer Sony and Nintendo. Our competition is Amazon and Google. I kind of think they're ahead of themselves on this, if only because the United States' internet infrastructure is not necessarily ready for this.
Yes.
But I guess they're going somewhere. They definitely see the cloud as the next battleground, and not necessarily these machines. But if you want to play the games looking their best, these games don't necessarily render as well, even if you have a great internet connection. And at their most timely, it looks like playing them locally on your PC or console is still the best way to go.
Yeah, well, we like our graphics cards and our hardware, so that makes sense for us.
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be our final thought usually on that, right? When we have things like this going for us, I don't see why we'd be moving elsewhere, but I guess time will tell. So I want to take us to another interesting thing going on in our space right now, which is over at Microsoft, which did some pretty interesting shakeup as to how it does business. So this week we learned that the folks behind its hardware, like its Surface PCs, its systems, will now be united with the team that works on Windows Client. This new division is going to be the Devices and Windows team. So basically the Windows people are working with the hardware people. So Matt, like you said, you've been in this space for a while. If there's some obvious implications there as to how PCs are built. Obviously, Microsoft isn't the only PC using Windows. They have OEMs working with them as well. So, what do you think that means for those partnerships?
I mean, it's a good question. Time will tell, right? But I have to think if you're Acer or Asus or Dell, you're a little bit worried, right? If you're going to Microsoft to optimize things for your hardware, and that your competition is part of the same business, right? I think there's definitely some questionable, whatever trends, like how no one really knows how this is going to happen. But I wonder at some point if I'm sure from the hardware side there's going to be sort of a push to I don't know, maybe create specific features for Microsoft's hardware, or perhaps there's a different ring for Windows eventually where the Surface devices get some of the newest features first, and then unfortunately someone's lowly Acer or Dell budget desktop might get some of those features later, and that's got to be I don't know, scary territory for the OEM partners, I think.
Do you think there's any benefit to that, just the consumers will ever see from this? It's kind of a high up there situation, but I wonder if there's any trickle down effect.
Andrew was our systems editor, so I think let's let him chime in.
To a degree,
Andrew? Is there any benefit to this at all?
To a degree, there's some
course.
benefit. The company to look at for that is Apple, which is that they have developed their operating system and their computers really tightly for years, and for a lot of people that means that they get a really quality experience. Windows is, as Matt said, they develop for hundreds and hundreds of devices. So in theory, this could make Surface and Windows more tightly integrated. It could make for Surface customers, it could make the Surface the computer to go to for Windows, the one it was designed for. But they're also talking about getting into more silicon diverse. If I read this from Panos Panay, he's the boss of Surface, and effective February 25th, Windows, he writes, "We believe that this will make the Windows client experience better for the entire PC ecosystem. Designing hardware and software together will enable us to do a better job on our long-term Windows bets, dual screen, silicon diversity, connectivity, app platform, etc. And having a single point of Windows client experience leadership driving consistent priorities and resourcing across all of Windows client will help us accelerate innovation and improve execution." So that's Panos Panay in an internal email reported by ZDNet, suggesting that this could be better for everybody. That would require a lot of communication.
Yeah.
So
across a lot of companies. Yeah.
Panay has made Surface almost $4 billion a year business for Microsoft. So, being really well integrated with Windows and being the best Windows experience would, in theory, make more money. But I don't think they're looking to, stop licensing Windows to Dell or stop licensing to HP. There's also been a bunch of buggy Windows issues. So if they have some hardware that they're aiming to support it for, maybe they can make a sort of reference design or reference guideline that means it's less buggy on less software.
Yeah, one can only hope. I mean, although the idea of that actually being a reality is kind of hard to believe right now, given all of the, every time for the last couple of years that Microsoft has released a major update to Windows, there's been, all kinds of problems. So the idea, I don't know, it just seems like that would complicate that situation.
There's some other potential reasons why this happened, and this is also via ZDNet's Mary Jo Foley, who had reported that a source had told her late last year that there were rumors that Panos Panay might have been looking for a new job, either like somewhere else in Microsoft or even outside Microsoft, possibly taking a break or going to Apple. So there's very much a possibility that putting Windows and Surface under the same guy, while a business plan is also just a plan to keep one of their stars there for a long time. And so we'll see how serious that becomes.
Yeah, I mean, this is, one of those people that turned around, is, I think, primarily responsible for turning around Surface, right? The first few years after it launched, it lost $1 billion. And, now it's making multiple billions a year. So kind of understand why they want to keep him on. I just wonder if long term it's a great idea to if that's indeed what happened, if they're kind of rearranging the strategy of multiple parts of their business under one umbrella just for one employee. I mean, we'll see. But I mean, also, the other way to look at this is, it's somewhat analogous to Android, right? And Google makes its own phones, and many other companies make Android phones, and I don't think the Pixel has garnered a huge chunk of the Android phone market. So
that's a good point.
The other big thing here is, I guess, it gives a little bit of new blood to Windows, having someone else oversee it. Joe Belfiore, who was in charge he's been working in Windows in some form since like Windows 95, right? He's been there a long time. He's making a full-on move to Office later in the year. And obviously everyone's still going to go to Executive Vice President Rajesh Jha, but there's, they do their reorganization, and this one just happens to have a lot more potential problems or potential issues, or I don't know, just it has bigger effects on the larger OEM marketplace in theory, but we won't know for a while.
No, I think it may potentially be a big benefit to the Surface devices, just a matter of like, how does that affect the rest of the ecosystem of Windows devices, right? So
yeah, we'll see.
That ecosystem's going to get more complicated as we get those folding devices coming in too, and Windows 10X coming out as well. So
that's one place where you could see a benefit. Speaking of the question you asked, the idea of like having the Surface Neo and Windows 10X developed together. Oh, okay, this makes sense. We had one we're developing it for, but it might also mean that others like Lenovo or Dell, who have showed up either actual hardware or concepts, might have to make things more like Microsoft to make that work.
Yeah, and I think that it again, it's going to give a benefit to Microsoft, right? Like, we saw some of those prototypes at CES, and Lenovo's actual product that obviously was supposed to ship with that version of Windows that still isn't announced yet, and they're trying to sell this very expensive device now without the OS that is going to be built for it. So, I mean, that's another area where I think companies like Lenovo are going to be in a tough position, where as if you're Microsoft building the hardware, obviously you're going to make sure that the software and the hardware line up, right?
Right. And depending on how they market things going forward, if Microsoft's able to put for Windows, by Windows, any sort of marketing that makes consumers who might not be as tech savvy just feel more confident that this is going to work to the best of its ability, then
Windows is best on Surface hardware.
wink. All right, well, believe it or not, we are actually running out of time. But before we go, of course, I want to remind you guys that all this interesting stuff we talked about and so much more interesting topics and reviews are all on tomshardware.com. We've got our lovely YouTube channel, which you've already found. So go on and explore all the other awesome videos we have and stalk us on social media. Thanks for watching.